For decades, traditional psychotherapy focused almost entirely on the isolated mind. Counselors mapped out early childhood trauma and unconscious desires while treating the family as distant background characters. By the 1950s, a new perspective emerged, moving the focus from the internal psyche to the interpersonal space between people. From a systemic viewpoint, an individual's symptoms are not isolated failures. They are functional behaviors used to maintain a sense of normalcy within a dysfunctional group. Think of a family as a highly sensitive web. A stressor striking one member forces a reaction from everyone else in the system. Trying to heal a member in isolation is often futile. If the relational environment doesn't change, it will eventually re-injure the individual once they return home. Take the Quest family, a blended household in deep distress. Jane is at her wit's end, while Paul remains distant and absorbed in his work. The family is fracturing. The older biological daughters are withdrawing toward adulthood, while two young, newly adopted boys are displaying severe aggressive behavior. Mapping the relational constellation reveals the unseen emotional boundaries here. We can see a volatile mix of intense enmeshment, distant zones of intimacy, and total disengagement. The clinician faces a difficult choice. Do you treat the boy's immediate violent behavior, or do you investigate the parents' private emotional histories? Every theoretical model provides a different answer, forcing a trade-off between rapid symptom relief and deep historical work. Systemic cognitive behavioral family therapy prioritizes immediate interactional patterns. It is an action-oriented approach focused on how a family communicates in the present. These concepts trace back to Alfred Adler, who focused on social embeddedness and birth order. He practiced systemic therapy decades before the term was even defined. With the Quests, a CBFT counselor acts as a coach. They actively teach Jane and Paul direct communication and conflict negotiation skills. The goal is to establish a clear parental hierarchy. By mastering these behavioral skills, Jane and Paul can rapidly de-escalate the children's violent behavior. But there is a blind spot. This method intentionally sets aside the deep historical trauma brought into the home by both the adopted boys and the parents. CBFT acts as a psychological tourniquet. It is highly effective at stopping immediate bleeding, but it does not address the underlying systemic wound. Murray Bowen's natural systems theory views the family as an evolutionary biological organism. It assumes human behavior is regulated by the same natural processes that govern all living things. The genogram is a multi-generational map tracking emotional fusions and cutoffs across decades. To help the Quests, the therapist diagrams 3 generations, tracing the historical roots of Paul's distance to understand the echoing anxiety. This process centers on differentiation of self. It requires a parent to stay entirely calm and objective while surrounded by the family's intense emotional reactivity. Looking at the trade-offs, this model is highly analytical. It moves slowly, heavily prioritizing decadal patterns over immediate behavioral changes. Bowen's method diffuses chaos by training parents to act as objective observers rather than reactive participants. Object relations serves as a bridge, connecting the depth of the internal psyche to the mechanics of the family group. The central mechanism is projection. Family members unconsciously offload painful emotions, forcing a spouse or child to carry the unprocessed weight. In clinical practice, the therapist acts as a blank screen. They intentionally invite transference to observe how parents project unresolved childhood wounds onto the children. By making these hidden psychological blueprints entirely visible, the family can finally address the unhealed wounds fueling their surface-level chaos. This reconstructive work requires a significant long-term commitment. It is expensive, creating barriers to access, and carries a legacy of mother-blaming that modern practitioners must actively correct. Object relations untangles decades of defensive patterns, though it exacts a heavy toll in time, emotional labor, and financial resources. While these theories differ, they are united by equifinality. Living systems can reach the same destination of health through many different starting paths. Success depends on matching the intervention to the crisis, rather than forcing one theory onto every family. When facing acute safety threats, a CBFT approach must be deployed immediately to stabilize the environment and establish hierarchy. When paralyzed by cyclical anxiety and repetitive behavior, Bowen's multi-generational mapping offers long-term clarity. For deeply enmeshed families with hidden resentments and necessary resources, object relations offers the depth required for psychological change. Ultimately, the effectiveness of a therapeutic lens is dictated by the family's socioeconomic reality, immediate danger, and capacity for deep work. This work places a heavy demand on the clinician. Fixing a system is completely dependent on the health of the person doing the fixing. In family practice, second-order cybernetics dictates the therapist is an active part of the system. Their presence and internal reactions directly influence the family's balance. If a counselor grew up terrified of conflict, they carry that blind spot into the room, unconsciously intervening to smooth over the very arguments the family needs to have. This creates a mandate for the practitioner. You must undergo rigorous personal therapy and exhaustively map your own family of origin before you attempt to map others. This personal work is the only way to achieve true presence, the single most important quality a practitioner can have, overriding any specific technique. Choosing this field is a dual journey. You cannot successfully illuminate a family's blind spots until you have ruthlessly confronted your own.